story about an artist. As you know, Penelope, this is called the oval portrait. The chateau into which my valet ventured to make forcible entrance, rather than permit me in my desperately wounded condition to pass the night in the open air, was one of the piles of commingled gloom and grandeur which had so long frowned upon the Apennine Mountains. To all appearance, it had been temporarily and very lately abandoned. We established ourselves in one of the smallest and least sumptuously furnished apartments. It lay in a remote quarter of the building, and its decorations were rich, yet tattered and antique. Its walls were hung with tapestry and bedecked with manifold of multiform armorial trophies, together with an unusually great number of various printed paintings in frames of rich and golden arabesque. In these paintings which hung on the wall, not only on their main surfaces, but in very many nooks, the bizarre architecture of the chateau rendered necessary. In these paintings, and my incipient delirium perhaps had caused me to take a deep interest. I bade Pedro to close the heavy shutters of the room, and since it was already night, to light the tongues of the tall candelabrum, which stood by the head of my bed, and to throw open far and wide the fringed curtains of black velvet which enveloped the bed itself. I wished all this done, that I might resign myself, if not to sleep, at least alternately to the contemplation of these pictures, and to the perusal of a small volume which had been found upon the pillow, according to criticize and describe them. Long I read, devoutly and devotedly I gazed. Rapidly and gloriously the hours flew by, and the deep midnight came. At length, the position of the light displeased me, and outreaching my hand with difficulty, I placed it as to throw the rays upon the book. But the action produced an effect altogether unanticipated. The rays of the numerous candles now fell within a niche of the room which had been hitherto thrown into deep shade by one of the bedposts. I thus saw in vivid light a picture all unnoticed before. It was a portrait of a young girl, just ripening into womanhood. I glanced at the painting hurriedly, and then I closed my eyes. Why I did this was not at first apparent even to my own perception, but while my lids remained thus shut, I ran over in my mind my reason for so shutting them. It was an impulsive movement, to gain time for thought, to make sure that my vision had not deceived me, to calm and subdue my fancy for a more sober and certain gaze. The first flashing of the candles upon the canvas had caused a dreamy stupor which was stealing over my senses to dissipate and startled me into waking life. The portrait was that of a young girl. It was a mere head and shoulders done in what is technically termed a vignette manner. The arms, the bosom, even the ends of the hair, melted imperceptibly into the vague yet deep shadow forming the background of the whole. The frame was oval, richly gilded. As a thing of art, nothing could be more admirable than the painting itself. But it could have neither been the execution of the work, nor the immortal beauty of the countenance which had so suddenly and vehemently moved me. Could it have been that my fancy, shaken from its half slumber, had mistaken the head of that of a living person? I saw at once the design of the vignetting and the frame must instantly dispel such an idea, must prevent even its momentary entertainment. Looking earnestly upon these points, I remained for an hour, perhaps, half sitting, half reclining, with the vision riveted upon the portrait, and at length, satisfied with the secret of its effect, I fell backward in the bed. I found the spell of the picture to be the absolute lifelikeliness of expression, which, at first startling, finally confounded, subdued, and appalled me. With deep and reverent awe, I replaced the candelabrum in its former position. The cause of my deep agitation being thus shut from view, I sought eagerly the volume which discussed the paintings and their histories, turning to the number which designated the oval portrait. I there read the vague and quaint words, "She was a maiden of rarest beauty, not more lovely than full of glee, and evil was the hour when she saw and loved and wedded the painter. He passionate, studious, austere, having already a bride in his art. She a maiden of rarest beauty, and not more lovely than full of glee. All light, all smiles, and frolicsome as a young fawn, loving and cherishing all things. Hating only the art, which was her rival, dreading only the palette and brushes and other instruments which deprived her of the countenance of her lover. It was thus a terrible thing for this lady to hear the painter speak of his desire to portray even his young bride. She was humble and obedient, and sat meekly for many weeks in a dark, high-turret chamber where the light dripped upon the pale canvas only from overhead. But he, the painter, took glory in his work, which went on from hour to hour and from day to day. And he was passionate and wild and a moody man, who became lost in reverie so that he would not see that the light which fell so ghastly in the lone torch, it withered the health and the spirits of his bride, who pined visibly to all but him. Yet she smiled on, and still uncomplainingly, because she saw that the painter took a fervent and burning desire in his task, and wrought day and night to depict her who so loved him, and yet who grew daily more dispirited and weak. Truthfully, some who beheld the portrait spoke of its resemblance in low words, as of a mighty marvel, and proof not less of the power of the painter than of his deep love for her, whom he depicted so surpassingly well. But at length, as the labor drew nearer to its conclusion, there were none admitted into the torch, for the painter had grown wild with the ardor of his work, and turned his eyes from the canvas rarely, even to regard the countenance of his bride. And he would not see that the tints which he spread upon the canvas were drawn from the cheeks of her who sat beside him. And many weeks had passed, and little remained to do, save one brush upon the mouth, one tint upon the eye. The spirit of the lady yet again flickered up as a flame within the socket of the lamp. And then the brush was given, and the tent was placed, and for one moment the painter stood entranced before the work he had wrought. But in the next, while he yet gazed, he grew tremulous and very pallid, and aghast, and crying in a loud voice, "This is indeed life itself," turned suddenly to regard